Welcome to The Chase, a 15-episode series on the Shallow End podcast feed that lets collectors tell their story about how they chased down a card, set, or player run that became a jewel of their collection. I'm Dave Schwartz, Iowa Dave Sports Cards on Instagram, and today's guest is someone who lusted after a card for several years before finally deciding to put himself in position to make it part of his PC. His name is Aaron, and on IG you can find him at Irish Sports Cards 21. You'll like Aaron's approach. He's a responsible collector determined to make prudent financial decisions. So, when he finally decided it was time to chase his grail, he did what it took to both get the card and do it in a responsible way. So today we welcome into the chase Irish Sports Cards 21, whose real name is Aaron. And Aaron, what kind of chase are we talking about today?
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me. We're talking about the 1996 Select Certified Mirror Gold Mo Vaughn that I recently picked up at the beginning of the year.
Great. First, as we get going, tell us about your connection to Mo Vaughn. Why him?
So for me, Mo Vaughn has always been my favorite Red Sox player. I grew up in New England, and I still live in New England. And my father used to have, or my dad used to have, season tickets to the Red Sox. He had partial season tickets when I was a kid, so we used to go to Red Sox games all the time. We'd make the hour commute after school, go down, see the Red Sox, come home at night a few times a week. It was pretty awesome. And I remember our seats were right along the first base line, and I had a direct line to Mo Vaughn, who at the time was their big power hitter, their best player, you could say, before Nomar came around, most popular player. And I really just became a huge fan of Mo Vaughn growing up. And when he went to the Angels, it was devastating for me. So my collection really is just Mo Vaughn Red Sox cards for the most part. But my connection is, just going to Fenway and just having so many memories seeing games and all of that with my family and my friends and stuff like that.
And if you're listening to this and you're younger and if you don't remember him, think about David Ortiz, but slightly shorter, also a lefty, and more of like more almost stronger and tougher in how he came across, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so it's funny. He has one of the most iconic stances, you could say, of all time. There's not a guy who grew up my age that didn't emulate him in the backyard playing wiffle ball. He had this bent over stance. He'd lean back and he'd just swing out of his shoes on everything. And he actually won an MVP. I believe it was 97 or 95 for the Sox. So he was definitely a really good player. And you could say that he was the Ortiz before Ortiz for the Red Sox.
So what was it that made you go after this card in particular?
Yeah, so my I guess you'd say my journey to collecting Mo Vaughn, or at least taking it serious, kind of really ramped up over the last year or so. I remember this card actually when I was little. I was probably like 8-9 years old, and I remember opening packs with my dad, and I remember getting a John Valentin red. And it was just a base card, the base red out of 1800. But I just remember like opening the pack and being just like through the roof, like excited to own that card. And I always kind of wanted a Mo Vaughn in that set. But the set only released about 65,000 boxes. So it's pretty hard to get your hands on. So when I got back into cards and, I went through the journey of, buying something from, what somebody said was a good investment during COVID and stuff like that. And I went through the whole football prism run. I went through, all these different avenues. I went through some wrestling stuff like that. And so for me, this card really was my ultimate grail for over 5 or 6 years since I've been back in the hobby. And I really never thought I would actually ever get it. Mo was always like my joke PC because I was always like, it's Mo Vaughn. Nobody ever collects Mo Vaughn. It's not really a good investment. And I kind of followed that thinking for a long time when I was back. And then I think once I actually stripped those thoughts away out of my brain and just kind of was like, this Mo Vaughn chase would be, this PC is actually a lot of fun and it brings me a lot of joy more than the, buying what the media tells you to buy, or like, hey, you should invest in Luca, for example. It's like, I didn't do that, but like the thoughts of investing was always kind of the forefront of my collecting for so long. So it wasn't until I actually was like, I don't care what people think, and I don't really care if my collection's really worth anything down the line. It makes me happy chasing my favorite player growing up. So this card, to tie it all back, this card was kind of my chase card when I was 8, 9 years old. I never got it. And then when I got back, it was number one on my list when I decided to take my Mo lane serious.
And was it a matter of you knew where maybe one or two were and you were just having trouble getting there, maybe financially or not wanting to spend that much? Or is it you couldn't find one? What were some of the obstacles you faced in coming?
Yeah, so some of the obstacles were, like I said, taking it serious. I have a bunch of different, my name, for example, on Instagram is Irish Sports Cards 21. So predominantly I'm a Notre Dame football collector. I've been a lifelong fan forever. And then my Mo Vaughn lane was kind of like my side PC. It was my, hey, this is a cool Mo Vaughn card. Let me just put it in my pile. And then, that pile starts to grow. And then you realize, okay, I'm just buying them to buy. And so I didn't really have any direction with it. It was just like accumulate Mo cards on the side, look at them, have fun. So I think one of the obstacles was just getting serious with it. And one of the things that, really helped me get serious with it was I initially saw the 1997 Super Rave pop up over the summer. And so I kind of was like, oh, okay, this would be a great ad. It's one of the other big Mo Vaughn cards. And so for me, trying to add that was step one. And so what I did was I've always kind of had the mentality that if I'm going to buy something, I need to sell something. And I kind of do things backwards, like most people do in this hobby, is I like to sell and have the funds in hand before I buy something. And normally when I do that, I like to give myself a little cushion on the top. So like if I'm spending, $100, I like to make sure I sell $200. And then what happens is, you can move it into something and you don't really feel that kind of not guilty feeling, but it's more like a, you're not putting your family in a financial position if you're just, spending $100 every couple of days on something. It adds up. And so my thinking has always been, if I'm going to sell something or if I'm going to buy something, I need to sell something. And so I think one of my obstacles was financially being in a position where I'm like not feeling like I'm, overextending myself and my family and all that. And so an obstacle for me has always been, making sure I feel good when I'm purchasing something. And then on the other flip side is one of the things that I've really had a difficult time with, and, it's taken a lot of time to get to this point, is feeling comfortable, like working my way up, feeling good, going from $5 to $10 cards, and then 10 to 20s, and then 20s to 50s, and then 50s to 100, and it starts to go up. And so like, I think initially I was always like, this is a piece of cardboard with the guy's picture on it. Why am I spending $100 on this just to throw it in my case? And it's like, you kind of have this, as you're working your way through the hobby, you kind of grow as a collector and you start to see like the things you like. And then it kind of starts to make sense where you're like, all right, I feel good buying $50 cards. Okay, let's buy the next tier up. Let's buy 100 and stuff like that. So I think one of my obstacles for me has really been getting comfortable spending money in the hobby to buy things that I want. And I don't think it gets talked about enough, at least, on most media platforms. People aren't talking about it. They're just like, hey, snap my fingers and I bought $1,000 card. For me, never been the case. It's always been, sell something, get comfortable before buying, even if it means I lose out on something. I've at least have the funds there to then act on something. And so to really, get to your initial question, it kind of all started when I bought the Super Rave. And so I got a Super Rave, I got it in hand, and I was like, this card's amazing. What I did was I sold, an entire collection. I had been gathering up 2012 Prism stuff for a very long time. And so I sold most of that. And I got the funds in hand to then buy the Super Rave Move On. And I got it in hand and I was like, this card's amazing.
So there's something that you said that's I think really important that I want to come back to, and that you described it as doing it backward, but it makes sense in which you want to get the money and then buy the card, as opposed to buy the card and then scramble and then sell what you have to sell. So when it was coming to that 96 certified Mirror Gold Move On, you realized, okay, I've danced around this long enough. I'm ready to make this move. And you started just to sell off some cards to be able to get it. Did you know where the card was at the time, or were you just trying to get into space in case it showed up?
Yeah, so I kind of knew where it was. It was over the beginning of the summer. I had seen it pop up on eBay, and it was kind of around the same time I was looking for the Super Rave. And so I saw it pop up, and then I started selling stuff. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, I have one objection. It's Super Rave. And then number two is, okay, I have this Grail, this Mount Rushmore card that I can eventually work towards. Maybe when I'm 70 and I have disposable income and, don't need to worry about paying bills and stuff like that. And so it always kind of sat there. And so I remember I reached out to the seller on eBay, and then I found out, and it was right around the time I created my Instagram, and I saw that he had an Instagram too. And so I messaged him and I said, hey, this is my end game card for Move On. Is there any way that you would work trade? And the guy was like, well, if you have something that I could sell in my store, I would be open to doing a trade. And so we kind of went back and forth, and it didn't really lead anywhere. Most of the things that I buy and collect for the longest time was things that I liked, and it wasn't necessarily things that he could sell in his store. And so it sat there. And then eventually, I got that Super Rave, and then I was like, okay, I love this dopamine hit of getting this Move On. Let's sell some more, baby. And so I went in and I had been collecting wrestling cards for a few years. And what I did was I packaged them all up. I kept a few of my favorites, and I'm like, I really don't need, this card. I could sell, I bought it for, 100, and I could sell it now for 200. So I was making some money on what I was selling, and I made a large, I brought in probably 20 slabs and sold in my local store. And I had enough to buy the Move On plus cover my, my tail, on how I like to sell things, and then make a little bit of money on top of it. And so what I did was I got the funds, and I circled back to him, and we worked a deal off Instagram, and he was super easy to work with. PayPal'd him the funds, and a couple of days later, the card showed up. So it was funny because my wrestling collection was everything I had just said. It was all $50 to $100 cards, because I never felt comfortable going over that threshold really until, I started seeing these Move On cards pop up, and I'm like, I need these. I actually have a tie to these, and it feels good to own them.
So he was the catalyst. And I've heard others talk before about some people are challenged by just, oh man, I can't find the card that I want. But for you and for others as well, it sounds like just getting over that mental hurdle of how much do I really want to spend on the cards. And so how did you finally decide, what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to make this jump with Move On.
I don't know. I just woke up one morning and I was like, it's time to do it. I had been dancing around it for a long time. And I have a lot of, I'm not one of those big collectors that has $1 million collection and stuff like that. I like to post things that I think are unique and cool and stuff like that. So, deciding to make this jump, it just kind of felt like the next step in my evolution, I guess you'd say, as a collector. I want to have really nice cards, but, I want them to be the cards that I want, not the cards that people are telling me to get. And so I felt like this Move On was perfect for me, because one of the things that when I got back into the hobby, I was blown away by the amount of parallels and stuff there were with new products and all of that. It's I couldn't even keep up. And so I remember opening that John Valentin card, for example. And for those of you who don't know John Valentin, Red Sox legend, probably the first time he's ever been mentioned on this podcast. But he, that was essentially this 96 Select Certified is the first Chase the Rainbow set in baseball. And so it's huge. And so, it all starts down with, there's mirror golds out of 30, mirror blues out of 45, mirror reds out of 90. And so it goes down. And I think there's 7 or 8 parallels you can chase. And so maybe ultimately that'll be my goal, is to get all the Mauve-Ons for this set. But like I wanted to have, the original, we'll call it the OG Mauve-On, rarest Mauve-On oldest and rarest Mo that you could own. And I was able to do that. So I think that's kind of what I was aiming at. And that's why it was, my Mount Rushmore card. It just checks all the boxes for me.
When it finally arrived and you would work the deal and it shipped to you and you got it, what was that like when you opened it up?
So for those of you who don't know what that's like, have ever held one of these in your hand, it's kind of like, I remember I texted my friend and I go, all right, it's in. I open it up and I go, I feel like I'm holding a lightsaber. Like the thing just glows. Like it's crazy. It's kind of like a Mountain Dewy gold. And so it's like, it just like from all angles just shines. And it's nothing like present day golds that you see. Probably the closest thing I could remember would be like some of the newer Prism stuff. Maybe it's close to, but I think this is just like on another level. It's kind of like a lightsaber-y glow. It's probably the best way to put it.
And it's one too where, I mean, not that you want to mess with the corners too much, but the corners almost feel sharp, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Mine's a PSA 8, and like it looks pretty good, and the corners are sharp and everything like that. And so, yeah, it definitely looks like you could use it as like a weapon or something. It's crazy.
So once you had that in hand, then how did you turn your collection? How did you turn your attention rather back to the Mauve-On collection? Was it a matter of I'm good, or was it a matter of now I've got this? What's next?
Yeah, so for me, I'm not looking too far down the road. If something cool pops up, I'll try to make a play on it. But as far as Mo, I'm pretty content. I was able to actually pick up his 97 Select or his 97 Pinnacle Mirror Gold, like between my Rave and the Mirror and the 96 Select Certified Gold. It's crazy. I was hitting like a hot spot for Mauve-On over a few month period. And, but like, as I sit here right now, I'm pretty content with it. I don't plan on adding Angels Mauve-On or Mets Mauve-On ever. It just doesn't hit for me. So like, I'll get messages all the time on like Instagram, like people being like, hey, you want this, Essential Credentials Mauve-On, and it's like, or this Rubies Mauve-On. And I understand that I'm missing out on some cool sets, but they don't actually hit home for me. So I don't know what I'm going to be adding in the future. We'll see.
so as we wind down, what would you say to someone, if somebody who listens to this and they're sort of in the same spot with a certain player, and they came to you and they said, how did you make that leap? What would you advise me to do? I've got my collection. These cards are all around $20 to $50, but I found one that's a couple $100. How would you recommend I proceed?
Yeah, I would just have that, that conversation with yourself, being like, hey, like for me, I had a ton of Angels Mauve-On that I had collected over the years, and I was able to actually move that because it just didn't hit for me. So like some advice for people, to make the next step up to get the card that they're looking for. I honestly think it just takes time. I don't think it's something you just wake up the next morning being like, let's just dive into buying $500, middle of the tier players. It just doesn't happen. It's like it comes in, as you grow as a collector, and you're like, you start looking at your case and you're being like, all right, what does my collection look like? And does it look like a time capsule, for example, or some kind of, I like to look at my collection like my fandom. So I'm like, all right, I was a huge Mauve-On fan. I'm a huge Notre Dame fan. I just recently started an Antoine Walker, collection as well. Nice. So I'm just finding all of these things that I'm like, these are kind of, quirky in a way, but they're my quirkiness. And so like for me to spend, $200 on a Mauve-On card, or $200 on an Antoine Walker card, or like $200 on a Notre Dame card, it's pretty easy now. But it was really hard doing it, going back to the $5 to $10 me that jumped back into the hobby, and then even $20 to $50. But I think ultimately it's like, as you start to accumulate things, you'll start to be like, well, I think less is more. And so you start to, chisel away at your collection. And then it's like, I'm not going to tell people how to fund things, but like my approach to funding it before I buy it, a lot of people will disagree with that, probably listen, but it's just always worked for me. And I have lost out on cards because of it, but, I'd rather have my sanity in my wallet. You know what I mean? So I don't like to chase money. And so I think with time, as you go on and you have the right convictions and stuff like that, you'll eventually get to the point that I got to where I felt comfortable doing it.
Well, Aaron, Irish Sports Cards 21 on Instagram. Congrats on that Mo Vaughn card. It is a stunner. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.